How many times have heard that voice in your head? Maybe it whispers in the quiet moments when no one's watching. Maybe it shouts when you look in the mirror, when you try something new, or when life knocks you down. It's a belief so common, so corrosive, that most people don't even recognize it as a belief anymore. It feels like truth, like fact, like something written in your DNA. But it's not truth. It's a program, a pattern, a script you didn't write, but somehow started performing every day of your life. Where did it come from? Maybe it started when you were a kid and someone made you feel small. Maybe it came from a teacher who thought they were being honest, a parent who projected their pain onto you, a coach who called you average, or a society that made you believe your value was tied to your grades, your looks, your bank account, or your ability to be liked. Somewhere along the way, you internalized the message, I'm only good enough, I succeed if I win, if I prove myself, if they approve. That's the great lie. We grow up in a world that confuses achievement with worth. So we hustle, we grind, we chase perfection, hoping it'll finally silence that voice. We become addicted to validation, to approval, to applause, thinking it will finally fill the hole inside. But here's the truth most people never learn. Self-worth is not something you earn, it's something you decide. Let that land. You don't become worthy when you get the job, when you find the relationship, when you lose the weight, or when you finally impress the people who never saw you. You were born worthy. That never changed. What changed was your belief. What changed was your story. There's a reason why people who have it all still feel empty. There's a reason why fame, success, and admiration don't erase self-doubt. Because if your worth depends on outcomes, you'll always be a prisoner to the next goal. You'll never be free. You'll never feel enough because you've tied your value to a moving target. Self-worth isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. You're not valuable because you've never failed. You're valuable because you're human, because you wake up and face your fears, because you get back up when life knocks you down, because you try again, even when it's hard. You're valuable before you succeed. You're valuable when you're learning, when you're stumbling, when you're unsure. Think about how you treat a child who's learning to walk. Do you scream at them when they fall? Do you call them a failure? Of course not. You celebrate their effort. You cheer their courage. You recognize the beauty of the process. Somewhere along the line, you stopped giving yourself that same grace. Somewhere, you decided mistakes were proof you weren't enough. But what if they're not? What if your worth has never once depended on your ability to get it right? What if it's your willingness to keep growing, to keep evolving, to keep showing up? That's what makes you enough. Here's the shift. You don't need to do anything to be worthy. Worth isn't something outside you. It's not something waiting at the end of a long list of accomplishments. It's inside you right now. It always has been, but you have to claim it. That's the uncomfortable part, because if you've spent years believing you're not enough, it feels safer to keep proving yourself than to simply accept yourself. But there's power in acceptance, not complacency, acceptance. That's the foundation of real growth. Because when you start from worthiness, you stop chasing and start creating. You stop performing and start living. You stop shrinking to fit someone else's mold and start expanding into who you really are. Your worth doesn't increase when people like you. It doesn't decrease when they don't. It's not tied to your past, your failures, or your flaws. It's not fragile. It's not negotiable. It's not up for debate. It's yours. But the world won't always remind you of that. That's your job. You've got to be the one who looks in the mirror and says, I'm enough. Not because I've achieved everything, but because I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I'm still trying. Because in a world that constantly tries to convince you to earn your place, the most radical act is to believe you already belong. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that strength means doing everything alone. That being independent means never needing anyone, never asking for help, and carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders with a smile. We glorify the lone wolf, the self-made warrior, the person who climbs every mountain solo and stands at the top saying, I did it all by myself. And while that image might seem admirable, it's also deeply damaging and dangerously false. The truth is, we were never designed to do life alone. Human beings are wired for connection. From the moment we're born, we reach out, crying for touch, for care, for comfort. We are social creatures at the deepest level of our biology. Our nervous system responds to being seen, being heard, being understood. And yet, somewhere along the journey, we start to believe that needing someone a weakness, that leaning on others is a flaw, and that accepting support somehow makes us less capable. But that belief isn't noble. It's a prison. Isolation isn't strength. It's survival mode. It's a coping mechanism dressed up as independence. It's what happens when life teaches you that people aren't safe or that vulnerability gets you hurt. So you build walls. You become strong. You learn, depend on no one. And maybe that gets you through the hardest seasons. Maybe that keeps you from feeling betrayed, disappointed, abandoned. But it also keeps you from love, from healing, from the magic that only comes when you let people truly see you. There's a kind of strength in going alone, sure. But there's a deeper, quieter, and more transformative strength in saying, I need help. That's not weakness. That's courage. That's self-awareness. That's truth. And it takes far more bravery to admit you can't do it all than to pretend you can. Every person you admire, every legend, every leader, every so-called self-made success story, none of them did it alone. Look closer. Behind every great achievement is a network of support. Mentors, friends, coaches, partners, believers, encouragers. The people who showed up when it got hard. The people who believed when the dream felt impossible. The people who said, keep going. When quitting felt like the only option. But when you buy into the myth of total independence, you rob yourself of that. You silence your own need for connection. You say no before anyone even has a chance to say yes. And it's not because you don't want help. It's because a part of you has been trained to believe you don't deserve it. Or worse, that if you ask, it'll make you less worthy of the success that follows. So you grind in silence, you suffer in silence. You hide your fears, your struggles, your doubts. Because you think strong people don't show those things. But real strength isn't about hiding. It's about being human enough to say, I can't carry this alone anymore. There's no medal for doing life solo. There's no trophy at the end for most self-reliant. What there is, if you're willing to reach for it, is connection. Deep, honest, nourishing connection. The kind that lifts you. The kind that holds space for your pain. The kind that sees the parts of you've been trying to carry alone for too long. Sometimes the strongest move isn't pushing through, it's pausing, picking up the phone, saying, I'm not okay. Sometimes progress looks like letting someone sit with you in the dark instead of pretending you're already in the light. Independence is not isolation. You can be powerful and still ask for support. You can be capable and still need a hand. You can be a leader and still fall apart. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. And the more real you're willing to be, the more space you create for others to do the same. Think about how much energy you spend trying to hold it all together. What would happen if you didn't have to? What would happen if you let someone in? If you dropped the armor for a moment and allowed yourself to be seen, not for what you can do, but for who you are? It's easy to confuse self-reliance with strength, but true strength is interdependence. It's the ability to give and receive, to lead and lean, to offer help and ask for it. Life was never meant to be a solo mission. You weren't meant to carry everything by yourself. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to struggle in silence just to show the world how tough you are. You're allowed to be strong and soft. You're allowed to be fierce and fragile. You're allowed to be someone who leads and someone who needs. Those aren't contradictions. They're complements. It's too late for me. That single sentence has stolen more dreams, silenced more voices, and buried more potential than any setback ever could. It doesn't matter if it's whispered by someone at 20, 40, 60, or 80. It carries the same weight. It's the illusion that time has passed you by, that your moment was behind you, that life closed the door before you even got the chance to walk through it. And the most dangerous part of that belief, it feels true. We measure our lives against invisible timelines. Finish school by this age. Get married by that age. Be successful, have kids, own a home. Find purpose, all before some unspoken deadline. And if you miss the mark, if you fall behind the imaginary schedule, that's when the lie creeps in. That's when it starts whispering that your time has expired, that you're playing catch up in a race you've already lost. But here's the truth that no one tells: your time is not your enemy. It's not your master. It's not a judge ticking down a clock, waiting to declare you too late. Time is neutral. Time doesn't care how old you are. Time doesn't label your dreams as valid or expired. You do that. And you do it based on comparisons, expectations, and fear. You're not too late. You're just early in a story that hasn't fully unfolded yet. Some people bloom in their teens. Others bloom in their 70s. There is no fixed moment you're supposed to arrive. No singular age where everything finally makes sense. That idea is a myth built on comparison. You see someone else succeeding early and assume that's the only timeline that counts. But their path isn't yours. Their success isn't proof you're behind. It's just a reminder that the path is different for everyone. We treat time like it's a straight line, as if the best years of your life exist only at the beginning. But life doesn't move in a straight line. It moves in seasons and cycles, in bursts of transformation and long stretches of stillness. You're not behind. You're just in a different season. And what grows in your season might not look like anyone else's, but it doesn't make it any less valuable. You're allowed to begin again. You're allowed to start something new at 30, at 50, at 70. You're allowed to change your mind, pivot your path, and rewrite the narrative you thought was set in stone. There is no expiration date on growth. There is no cutoff point for courage. The belief that it's too late doesn't come from truth. It comes from pain, from regret, from all the moments you didn't take the risk, didn't say yes, didn't follow the pull in your heart because you thought you had more time back then. But here's the power you've been ignoring. You still have time. Not for ad infinitum, but enough. Enough to do something meaningful, enough to change direction, enough to matter. Too many people use age or timing as an excuse to avoid the fear of starting. It's easier to say it's too late than to admit you're scared. Begin again. It's easier to say my time has passed than to face the vulnerability of trying, failing, and rebuilding. But the truth is, there's nothing noble about giving up on yourself. There's nothing brave about playing small just because the world convinced you your moment has passed. Every minute you spend telling yourself it's too late is a minute you'd be using to start, because starting now is always better than staying stuck. The people you admire, the ones who did something extraordinary later in life, they didn't have more time. They had more belief. They decided that now was good enough. That starting imperfectly was better than waiting forever. That rewriting the rules mattered more than living by someone else's outdated script. Don't confuse delayed with denied. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. Just because the road is longer than you thought doesn't mean it's not leading somewhere powerful. Some of the most beautiful chapters in your story will be the ones you thought would never be written. You don't have to be the youngest. You don't have to be the fastest. You just have to be willing to try again, willing to believe that it's not too late, willing to stop treating time like a curse and start treating it like a canvas. Because every day you wake up with breath in your lungs is another chance to begin again. Failure. Just the word itself carries weight, echoes with disappointment, shame, embarrassment, and pain. We've been taught to run from it, to avoid it at all costs, to treat it as the enemy of success, as a sign that something went wrong or that we went wrong. From the time we were children, we were graded, ranked, and praised for getting it right, and quietly pushed aside or judged when we didn't. So we learned, often unconsciously, that to fail is to fall short, to be exposed, to be less. But that belief that failure is proof of inadequacy is one of the most toxic and limiting ideas we carry. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's the pathway to it. It's the training ground, the refining fire, the moment where you find out what you're made of. Every great achievement you've ever admired was built the foundation of failure. Behind every breakthrough is a string of breakdowns. Behind every winning moment is a trail of missteps, stumbles, rejections, and false starts. The problem isn't failure. It's how we interpret it. We don't fear failure because of the thing itself. We fear what we think it means about us. We fear the judgment. We fear being seen trying and not succeeding. We fear the feeling of not being good enough. We fear the humiliation that comes when we care about something and it doesn't work out. But let's be honest. Most people aren't afraid of failure. They're afraid of looking like a failure. That's what paralyzes people. The idea that others will see them fall and decide they're not worthy, not smart, not talented, not valuable. So instead of trying, they hesitate. Instead of risking, they play it safe. They avoid putting themselves out there not because they can't do it, but because they can't bear the thought of what people might say if they don't get it right the first time. That fear of humiliation becomes a prison. It's invisible, but it's powerful. It keeps people stuck in jobs they hate, relationships that are lifeless, routines that are comfortable but unfulfilling. It convinces them to shrink their dreams down to something manageable, something less risky, something that won't expose them to the possibility of falling flat in front of others. But what if we've been looking at failure all wrong? What if failure is not something to be ashamed of, but something to honor? What if it's not proof of your weakness, but evidence of your bravery? Because the truth is, the people who fail the most are the ones who are actually in the arena. They're not watching from the sidelines. They're showing up, putting their heart on the line, risking discomfort, and choosing growth over comfort. And that takes guts. Failure means you had the courage to care about something enough to try. It means you didn't just dream about it. You moved toward it. And that movement, even when it ends in disappointment, is something most people never allow themselves to experience. They stay in the realm of, what if? So they never have to confront the feeling of, it didn't work. But if you let it, failure will teach you things success never could. It will strip away the ego. It will sharpen your instincts. It will show you what doesn't work so you can find what does. It builds resilience, character, and clarity. It forces you to deciding, do I still want this badly enough to try again? And in that decision, you discover a deeper truth about yourself, one that comfort and easy wins can never reveal. Some of the most admired and successful people on the planet have failed more times than most ever tried. But they didn't wear that failure as a scarlet letter. They wore it like armor. They collected their losses, learned from them, and kept moving forward. Because they understood something most people don't. The goal isn't to avoid failure. The goal is to outgrow your fear of it. You cannot become exceptional while living in fear of looking foolish. You cannot evolve while clinging to your pride. Growth requires exposure. It requires showing up imperfectly. It requires doing things you're not great at, falling on your face, and standing back up again with dirt on your hands and a fire still burning in your chest. Humiliation is a story you create. Embarrassment is optional. What matters isn't whether you fall. It's whether you let that fall define you. The person who tries and fails is infinitely more powerful than the one who never tries at all. Because effort is where transformation begins. Failure is not a dead end, it's feedback. It's information, it's redirection. And sometimes it's the very thing that pushes you to rise higher than you ever would have if everything had gone smoothly. Failure isn't something to hide. It's a badge of courage. It's a sign that you're doing something real, something difficult, something worth your time. It means you've stepped beyond what's easy and dared to stretch towards something that matters. This is just who I am. It sounds final, doesn't it? As if the version of you standing here today is the full and final edition, the end of the line, the finished product. As if your identity was written in stone long ago, and all that's left to do now is live it out. But that belief, that your personality, your habits, your reactions, your results are fixed and permanent is one of the most deceptive lies you'll ever believe. You're not stuck. You're just following a script. Somewhere along the line, you picked up a story about who you are. Maybe it came from childhood. Maybe it came from pain. Maybe it came from someone else's voice got so loud you started calling it your own. Over time, that story became familiar, and the brain loves familiarity more than it loves progress. So you repeated the lines, you played the role, and eventually you forgot it was just a role in the first place. You have a screwed up life. You said, like, I'm not a confident person. I'm not good with people. I've never been the type to succeed. I'm too emotional. I'm too cold. I just can't commit. I've always been this way. And when you say something enough times, it becomes a loop. Not because it's true, but because you've reinforced it so consistently that changing it now would feel like betraying your own identity. But what if the real betrayal is living small because you're afraid to rewrite the script? People aren't stuck because they lack talent, discipline, or intelligence. You have a secure life. They're stuck because they confuse who they are with who they've been. They believe that what's familiar is what's true, but there's a massive difference between what's familiar and what's possible. The version of you that shows up today is just a reflection of repeated patterns. not permanent limitations. The human brain is designed for adaptation. Neuroplasticity, the science of how your brain rewires itself, proves this over and over again. Your habits can change. Your beliefs can change. Your emotional responses can change. Your entire personality can evolve if you give yourself permission to become someone new. But most people never do, because it feels safe to stay consistent. Even if that consistency keeps them miserable, there's a strange comfort in repeating old patterns. You know how they end. You know what to expect. Predictable pain often feels safer than uncertain growth. So you keep doing what you've always done, even though a part of for something more. The truth is, you're not broken. You're rehearsed. You've rehearsed your excuses. You've rehearsed your limitations. You've rehearsed your insecurities. You've rehearsed the language of someone who doesn't believe in themselves. And because you've rehearsed it for so long, you have convinced yourself that it's reality. But reality isn't just what you observe. It's what you create with repetition, with intention, with belief. Identity is not a prison. It's a choice. Every day, in every moment, you are choosing who you are by what you believe, what you say, and what you do. The problem is, most people don't make that choice consciously. They let their past choose for them. They let old pain write the next chapter. They let old failure define what's possible. And then they call it fate or personality or destiny. But it's none of those things. It's just a pattern that hasn't been challenged yet. You don't have to keep playing the same role. You don't have to keep repeating the same story. You can interrupt the script. You can flip the page, say, this isn't who I am. It's just who I've been. And in that single moment of awareness, you take back control of your narrative. The most powerful transformations don't come from adding more to your life. They come from subtracting the lies. They come from letting go of who you think you have to be so you can become who you were meant to be. But that requires one uncomfortable truth. The story you've been telling yourself about why you can't change is the only thing that's really in your way. The same mind that created the pattern can uncreate it. The same voice that's been keeping you small can be retrained to speak power into your life. You are not a fixed identity. You are not locked into one version of yourself. You are a process, not a product. A becoming, not a being. You are a walking rewrite in progress. Change isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of who you really are underneath the fear, the doubt, the pain. You have a script that told you to settle. But nothing will change until you stop mistaking the script for the truth. Nothing will shift until you realize that identity is fluid, flexible, and fully within your reach. You don't need to reinvent everything overnight. You just need to take one line of the script and question it. One sentence you've always repeated to yourself and ask, is this actually true? Or have I just believed it for so long that I stopped challenging it? That's how transformation starts, not with a dramatic overhaul, but with the courage to ask better questions about who you are and who you're becoming. You've been living under beliefs that were never yours to begin with. Beliefs that told you're not enough, that you have to go it alone, that your time is past, that failure is fatal, that your identity is fixed. But none of those things are truth. They're stories, scripts. You inherited ideas passed down, fear, pain, and other people's limitations. And here's the good news: stories can be rewritten. You are not powerless. You are not stuck. You are not late. You are not alone. And you are not defined by what didn't work, who didn't believe in you, or the version of yourself you've been rehearsing for years. You are defined by what you choose next. That's where all your power lies. In the next decision, the next belief, the next action. So stop waiting. Stop shrinking. Stop surrendering your future to a set of lies that were never built to serve you. This is your life, your path, your voice, your moment.